hello. Yeah, so first off, I just flew back from Oktoberfest yesterday. So if I'm groggy or whatever, but my arms are very tired because the steins are really heavy. Yeah, so there's a lot of really like famous Ruby people here and also people presenting on behalf of like real companies. And I'm neither of those things. So I thought maybe I would just start off with a little bit about who I am, why I'm up here about this. My name's Jonathan, and I was that annoying guy in your computer science program who was constantly on about the game studio he was going to start after he graduated. So I teamed up with some classmates, and this is about as far as we got. You can take that to the bank, turns out. So after that project died, the slow, lingering death of a dream you just can't let go of, I found financial refuge in the world of web software. My first job was working on a Cake PHP-based application. And then I moved to a marketing agency that ran a custom CMS built on Rails 2. And like it didn't fully make sense to me at that point, and I was kind of a Python dork in those days. So I sat down and tried to teach myself Django. And I decided the best way to go about that would be to set a goal. I was going to try to rebuild one of my favorite childhood games, a space empire game called Pax Imperia. And Pax Imperia was kind of the Macintosh kids' alternative to Master of Orion, Space for Ho, and some others. Broadly, this is a category of games called 4X games. Somewhat problematically, it stands for explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate. The 90s, huh? The civilization games, if you know those, like Sid Meier's, those are also broadly speaking in the sort of 4X category, right? So players develop and expand sort of like their technology base. They move on to the next area, they sort of grow their empire, and they move on from there. Eventually, they meet other players, and they either choose diplomacy or they choose to punch each other in the face, whatever suits them. So in 2009, I built this. I call my project Galactic Impact. I'm sort of obsessed with this idea of like permanently mutable shared online spaces. And so I imagine my players would be permanently impacting the galaxy in some way. And the domain name was available, so it didn't hurt. I was a really inexperienced game designer at that point, and also software engineer. And so ran into some mechanical problems pretty quickly. These 4X games have a sort of exponential growth curve, which is not really fun in a multiplayer user environment. So I pressed pause on that and intended to get back to it. I moved to Boulder, I bounced around some startups. If you recognize me, it's probably because I used to mouth off a lot at Boulder Open Coffee Club. I did some freelance and some consulting, and I eventually landed as a frontline manager at a big tech company, which all of you probably use our flagship tool. Alongside of this, I started designing board games. I designed roughly a dozen or so, and actually managed to get 2 of them licensed with publishers, and made into actual games that you can go buy. One of these I found on the shelf at Powell's, which was really quite an experience. That was really fun. And so all that to say, I have some familiarity with web software, and I have some passive familiarity with game design, although I don't really consider myself an expert on either of those things. So starting off with some goals for the talk here. Now with sort of like intro out of the way, first, I want to convince at least one person in this audience that a vanilla Rails installation is a game engine out of the box. And second, I want to show every person in this room something that you've never seen Rails do. And I'm hoping that the shock value of that second goal is going to stave off the post-launch sleepies. So when you say game engine, what do people usually think about? They usually think about probably one of these 3 technologies these days, Unreal Engine, Godot, or Unity. And they're great, and they're really good for fast, real-time things. They bring a lot of specialty tools and optimizations, which can be useful for leveraging your CPO, digging into sort of bit hacking if you need to do that kind of stuff to optimize your stuff. And they're awesome, but I don't have time to learn them. And they've been around for a long time. Fun fact, that screenshot predates the release of Unity v1 at WWDC by 3 months from earlier. And so what do these game engines do? Primarily, like first, they take user inputs and they apply mutations to a game state. And usually there's another thread which is attempting to render that game state back to the user as fast as possible. This is where kids talk about the frame rate of their like gaming PCs, whatever. And then there's often, and they're trying to do that as fast as possible. A lot of times there's also another thread going on that is simulating the game state in some way, physics or things moving or whatever, but not always. Wow, what else does these things? What takes user input, applies it to a consistent state, and renders back to the user, and also offers up tools to do background work without user input. Sounds a lot like Rails to me. And now with ActionController, we actually can do some of this. We can render a little bit faster even than just the HTTP response cycle can allow. Yeah, and so, sorry. Yeah, so obviously we're not going to be rebuilding a call. We're not going to be building a Call of Duty or a Portal or anything that like a sort of first-person shooter kind of thing with Rails. The inherent latency of HTTP is going to make that impossible. But not every game is that. Yeah, think about a card game. There's a lot of card games that are in video game form now. There's Charterstone, Slay the Spire, those kind of things are really successful. Or you think about correspondence chess, actually doesn't have a simulation loop. Every actual change to the game state is driven by the input by a user. So a user makes a change, changes the game state, that's reality now inside the game. And so I even think that with a little bit of like JS animation and kind of some clever optimizations, I think you could probably even fudge some sort of real-time looking kind of things. Because what's interesting about building games is what's most important is you're trying to put an entertainment into a person's head. You're not actually trying to solve a business need. You're not actually trying to like do a fixed thing. And in fact, user perception is more important than actual factual accuracy, which is a whole other talk. Here, I'll put the slides on Slack later, so you can pull this up. But I once attended a talk from the designer of Civ, where actually the random number generator in Civ fudges outcomes to match human perception, like human failings of perception of statistics, rather than accurately doing things. So what a user feels is most important. And so from that perspective, I think actually a SaaS platform like Rails actually has some advantages over game engines. Every page refresh is an opportunity to get new client code. You don't have to download new things. I don't know if anybody uses Discord. You have to add new updates every time you launch it. With Devise or another like login system, you're multiplayer by default. And last I checked, the web is still an open platform, at least right now. And so there's no Apple or Steam tax if you choose to charge people for your thing. So back to story mode. 2020, the year shouldn't be named. In the depths of lockdown, I was on a video session with my therapist, and quite a surprise, he suggested that I might need something more productive to focus on than watching another Marvel movie or drinking wine. So I sat down to rebuild Galactic Impact from scratch, this game from my sort of early career. And after a decade of working with Rails applications in production and designing game experiences, I had a little bit more success this time. So I'm using Rails as a game engine right now. So I suppose de facto I've proven my own assertion from the beginning. Checkmate, nerds. And so from that sense that like because a game is more about giving an experience to a user rather than solving a business need or a problem, I find it's easier to start with design principles and say, hey, what fits inside of these principles, what doesn't, to kind of help you design instead of like a product need or, hey, we're going to get more customers if we, whatever. This is how I like to think about game design versus product design. And so my goals with Galactic Impact are to homage 90s 4X games. This is not a re-implementation. I want to confront some of the shittier parts of that sort of genre, right? Colonialism is bad. And I want to respect users' lives. I don't want to add gambling mechanisms, loot boxes, chain people to cascading timers like Mafia Wars or Farmville kind of things. And I also don't want to have any of my features be pay to win, right? I want people who are free users to have just as good an experience as everybody else. And the shared galaxy is persistent. Back to my earlier sort of obsession. This means that the in-game economy has to be circular so that the game doesn't need eras or restarts, and established players can actually gain benefit from working with a newer player. And so I'm going to move on to demo. A live demo here from Docker. I don't think it'll be fine. But just keep in mind, while I'm demoing these things, and as I go through some code examples in a minute, I'm just one guy with some middling skills, and I don't have the benefit of code reviewers because I'm a solo dev. So if you see something whack in here, it's fine. Come catch me in the hallway, bludgeon me with my mistakes later. And it's a work in progress, right? one of the things that's an advantage of SaaS is that you can continuously deploy it, right? You don't need to burn something to a CD. You don't need to get someone to download tons of updates. They open their PS4 on Christmas morning. So here is a look at the game. So the main screen is this two-dimensional map of stars. And players can sort of drag around this. They can see stars on the thing. Each player, and I'm going to talk through some of the Rails aspects of this too. So each player has a user record for login, manage through devise. They have an empire record, which manages all their personal stuff, like all the stuff about their game experience. So they're like the amount of money, and it's used as a relational object for everything else inside the game. They have a relationship with a subset of stars. Empire star there's a record with some metadata, whether it's explored or unexplored. And so when an Empire sensor technology reveals a new star to them on the map, I create a new Empire star, and then it shows up on this view. And then when they send a ship there and they explore it, then I update a bit, and now they can see more of what's in there. And so now they can say, oh, maybe they've been now they go to the system and they can see there's some planets there orbiting the star, whatever. Maybe a planet is inhabited. So here in this example, there's one of this other empire, the Villainy Empire, has set up a world here on this thing. So a planet has one, where a world belongs to a planet. And a world can have many structures. So the world has a surface, players can build structures on them. And we have this sort of like SimCity classic view where, and this is, if we switch to one that I actually own, there's a lot on here, sorry. But this has this sort of SimCity classic view where you're like building infrastructure on a planet. This is a form. This is a radio button over here on the right. This is a really elaborate radio button, and this is 100 submit buttons with different values attached to them to like do their locations. And so one particular structure allows me to build ships on this planet, like build new starships to send off into the cosmos. And so what? So then what happens is each lets me queue up instructions for the world to do this action of building a ship. And so orders. So I have a concern, or a model concern that called unit, which has many orders, and orders acts as a list. And so these are all just like very basic Rails things. And so now I can queue up orders with a priority queue on a world. So now on a turn, so the way I handle the simulation aspect of a sort of game engine thing is the game updates every 3 hours. And every 3 hours feels like a reasonable amount of time where it's a consistent number. It's eight turns a day, so people can plan around it. And with this queuing system, you don't have to be involved every single time. You can sort of queue up stuff. You can send your ships off. You can set your resources to be built. And then you can come back to it tomorrow. And then once you come back, then each world is collecting sort of this like transactional record of like all the things that have been going on. And so you can come back in and say, oh, there was some sort of production problem. I got to go investigate what my ships were doing. The next thing I have is this sidebar, which I call a roster. And it's one place, it's a list of all the things I know about. It's a list of all the stars that I might know about in the system and or in the game. And then I also have a fleet of all my ships. And I got a little stimulus controller on here that can do sorting and some filtering on here to like help you find all that kind of stuff. Which brings me to ships. And so ships are one of those, sort of your core unit of the game. You send them to other planets. You engage with other players using them. Ship also implements the unit concern, and so it can take a queue of orders, and so I can queue up orders on a ship. And so here I have a series of forms that can generate a new order, a new set of order records on this ship. And the forms that I choose to show here are based on stats that the ship has. So if you have star drives, I can dispatch. If you have weapons, you can attack. So felt like the language was duck typed, so maybe the ships in the game should be duck typed too. Let's see. So and then my relationship with other players is there's a join model I call diplomacy because I didn't want to call it empire record or empires record. I wasn't even sure what the pluralization there should be. But it's also not reflexive because maybe I know about Spike's empire because I found his ships running around the galaxy, but he hasn't found mine. And so I might have a diplomacy for Spike, but Spike might not have one for me. And so I can sort of set some metadata about how I'm feeling about this. So internally, maybe I want to treat them as an enemy, but I'm going to broadcast to them that I'm neutral or I'm friendly, and I'll figure it out sooner or later. But you can do some subterfuge there. And the last important feature of this kind of game is the technology tree. So this is like a really, really key part of the sort of 4X universe where you invent one thing and then it leads you to inventing another, gives you better, faster ships, technologies on your worlds that can give you better resources, whatever. Technology records have many dependencies. They have a cost. And so as the empire has an empire technology for each of the dependencies, then it enables my ability to do that. So all of this is very much like everything I've shown so far is completely just bog standard Rails, nothing but project code, like nothing weird, nothing out of the box. So these game features are all just there, right, for like associations and updates and that active record. But ultimately, like a CRUD app is different than games in a lot of ways, especially perception, right? We've talked a lot about perception and how that impacts like what people's experience of the game is. So whether you are a player who's trying to do something in the game that you're not expecting or that you're expecting because you've seen games do it, or a developer who's trying to get units to do something in particular, I've had to go off the rails. That was an unintentional pun, but I love it. So I've sort of gone off the rails in a few places. And every single time I've been nervous that it was going to become a mess, or I'd end up in a place where I was like questioning my choice of like using Rails to build this. But every time Rails gladly has gone along with it. I say, hey, Rails, can we support this feature? And it says, yeah, boss, real sexy, just like you asked. And so, all right, so you ready to see some like weird things? Yep, cool. Great, so we'll start with the mild ones and we'll end with the wild ones. So the first thing is awesome, and if you have any sort of geometric stuff in your system at all, highly recommend this. PostGIS. It's a set of extensions for Postgres, and there's a gem active record PostGIS adapter that gives you all these tools inside your Rails application. So here is an example of a schema record or a schema entry with this enabled. So stars have a location field, you see, with a type geometry and some parameters there. They also have an index on location. And so now I am able to create a destination model concern, and I can create a scope called within radius of, and now I have like sort of abstracted some of the complexity around this particular tool. But now I have a scope on a star, on a ship, or anything with a location where I can easily run a query to find ranges. It's really important. It's like, oh, can I see that ship over there? Are my sensors strong enough? Oh, are my weapons, can they shoot far enough to do that? And so here's an example of it being used like in a chain with other concerns, and it just works. It's like really nice to sort of push that querying down into the database instead of instead of like my app having to have some sort of like hackneyed like Pythagoras or something built in. And here's another example of querying for this on the star record, where like also again chained with other concerns or chained other scopes. So that's the first thing. The second thing, what is this? Oh, yeah, and then so and then the next bit, it's not strictly PostGIS, but the RGeo package also is really, really cool. The interface is not exactly what I was expecting, but it does a lot of really awesome stuff. And so here in this example here, I can take an empire, take all of an empire's holdings, all their worlds delegate location to planet, which delegates to the star, which is a little lazy and expensive here, but I can call this one method geometry.hull, which is like a convex hull is like if you stretch a rubber band around a series of points, you get a sort of a circle shape. I can do that with an empire's set of stars. And then when a new player is signing up and I'm testing points to see if it's okay to start the new player in that part of the galaxy, I can take all of those convex hulls and I can map reduce them together because they're just Ruby objects. And I can map reduce them together. And I can say, is this going to put a new player in someone's backyard? And I can say, no, yes, it is. So I'm going to choose a new location. That's pretty cool and really useful. Next thing, I mentioned that the game runs every 3 hours. The game's turn-based. And so I have a cron script that runs every 3 hours, and it kicks off Sidekiq job with a ton of batches. I was like really interested in the last talk. I looked up, I did 200,000 a day just with this. And so this is, you don't need to like get in here, but all this to say, like I go to each unit and I say, hey, units, plan what you're gonna do. If your plan is to punch somebody, I'm gonna put you in this room over here. And if it's not, I'm gonna let you go ahead and do your thing. But each time there's like a batch of work that gets done and then we move on to the next thing. And so it works really well and it updates things, and I've been able to kind of do all the interactions between unit types that I've been interested in doing. But you might ask, like, even with batches, like this probably takes time, right? Like this takes like a few minutes to like work through a few thousand of these records. What happens if somebody logs in the middle of this? Like, are they seeing things in a weird state? Or heaven forbid, they find out some sort of timing hack and they can sort of jump in during the update and break things? I would say that's a great question. I would also add that there's a tutorial as players are joining that I don't want to interrupt with this game state. So there's like situations where I do and don't want people involved in the update. And so the way I have solved for that is with input blocking. When it is time to, so this is the method that gets called by my cron script, GameManager.update. And what it does is it takes all the empires, plucks their IDs based on like if they have finished the tutorial, they're considered active. It plucks all their IDs, and then I call this start resolution method. And the start resolution method just writes this to a cache key. And so now there's a cache key with a list of IDs of all the empires whose units are part of this update. And in my application controller, I have a before filter, which is if the game is being updated and the user who is currently acting is part of the update, shunt them off to this other view, and just kind of like put them in a holding tank with like a set timeout on that page to refresh once the game is back in action. I'm also having a lot of fun with like the new hotness. I don't know if is it still new. It's a few years old, I guess. I don't know. I like it. I think all the times that I have worked professionally in a Rails application, maybe this has changed it's been a few years, but people don't talk enough about TurboStream as an HTML tag. Like I feel like there's a lot of conversation about TurboStream as like with sockets, but using TurboStream in an HTML tag is awesome. It like lets you sort of splatter updates across your whole application every time like you get a response back. So here is an example where if a ship changes, then there might be an expectation that like the map will change and then also the roster should change. And so anytime there's a change, I can just include this partial and it will send back those things and it'll update both of those places. Here's another example. It's a lot more extensive, but it shows that it's like I'm sending back lots and lots of places, because you can imagine as I have a world and I build a new piece of infrastructure there, lots of things could potentially change about the state of things. And so I can show this in action here. So here I have a world that has some infrastructure on it, but not a ton. And over here I can see it's like vastly overpopulated for it has these 2 meters basically telling me that things are out of whack. So I'm gonna build some more housing, which we should all be doing everywhere. And as I'm doing this, note that this is debiting money from my Galactic Credits account here and is changing the size of this meter. And so now as I build one more, now this like meter has told me that like things are okay, and now actually I have enough capacity for the people who live there. Also my power meter is off, and so I can also say, all right, maybe I'm gonna build a power station. I build a power station, and this streams this back and streams this back also. And so I've really enjoyed that, and it's been been really helpful. This is gonna be right. Oh yeah, did it. So the other thing so my new HTML, other than TurboStream, my new favorite HTML element is summary. It's a summary and details combo. I don't know, is it like, people know this? Is this like common? Like, have you used it, not used it? If you put a lazy loaded turbo frame with a source, into one of these, it works exactly how you would expect it to. So when it's hidden, it doesn't show, and when it opens up, it shows. And so on the roster, I'm able to, I'm on the roster, I was going to be able to move back and forth between things more quickly, but on the roster, it is quite expensive to try and show all these things at once, right? So there's a lot of information in here, but as I open these up, you can sort of see that like this is lazy loading each of these like elements inside there because I've put that turbo frame inside the summary element. Let's see, and then at this conference a couple years ago, I was talking about wanting to like make some turbo frame only routes. Somebody, I forgot, I don't remember who it was. Somebody's like, "That's code smell, don't do that." But I found a helper inside the actual inside the toolkit that does that. So I just went ahead and did it anyway. Code smell or not. So next thing that has been really fun that I found is this is not strictly Rails, but this was a new development, and new for me means built after 2010. Is this document.elements from point. And so the map is a 2D space, and so there are like units, and there's like ship chits and stars and icons and stuff that are on the map, and they might be stacking up all over the place. But a user might need to want to be interacting with any of those. And so this JavaScript method sort of sends a raycast down through the DOM and returns an array of all of the elements that it has touched, all the elements that are intersect with that point. And when I first built this in 2009, it did not exist. And so I had to do some sort of craziness to make it work. But so now what this lets me do is, so now there's two enemy ships maybe coming over here, and I'm looking over here. Oh, it turns out there's actually 5 ships there, and they're overlapping. And now I can easily get to any of these to access them with like my standard HTML tools. Or here's my star that I want to look at, or my ship they're like sort of on top of each other render-wise, but I can still access them because I have like raycast down from my cursor point to find what's there. And I have a code for this also. Yeah, and so I have a StimulusController that I attached to the Galaxy map, and these element from points, and it turns it back, and then I can use it. I can show the disambiguator to like help people find that stuff. Let's see. I think I'm running low on time here. I'm gonna skip this. I have some data files that so the database is a blend of integer keys and UUIDs. I want things that the users generate to be non-sequential, non-guessable, and all that stuff. But I have a lot of like game data that needs to be matched across my like development environment, my staging environment, my production environment. And so I don't want those to be UUIDs because I don't want to try and like tangle with that. I don't want them to be generated incorrectly, whatever. So I've created these CSV files that are committed to the repository, and I have a script, or I have a rake task called a slurp script that goes through those CSV files and like updates the database. So someone can go in and fiddle with them online, or then they can be ported back to those CSV files, and you can test out like, oh, maybe the ship should be a little stronger. And then the next thing is, in a game like this, like eventually someone's going to want to fight, and then more annoyingly, they're going to want to know what happened, what the outcome of the fight was. And so, as you can imagine, people want to see things. So this is an example of like what I show after a battle. And so this is sort of 3 ships are attacking this one planet. So Dancing Bean Collective has started this assault on Solove's outpost. And so, some of you are probably thinking about the schema for this in your head right now. There's some nodes and some edges, and it's like, that's relatively easy to render here. The problem being that this battle might have happened 3 months ago, and so my nodes can't reference the live units. They need to sort of like take stock of like the point in time data for those units and be able to capture that. And so here is sort of unsurprising piece of schema here. There's interaction participants. I use interaction and combat sort of. I got indecisive about which to call it, so I sort of ended up using both. It was terrible. And so interaction participants, it references a participant, and the participant can be a world or a ship. and then an interaction edge, which has a source and a target, which is those participants, some damage, and a verb. The interesting thing that is going to come out of this is that there's also this before and this after field. And so what happens is when I generate an interaction participant record to sort of capture what's going on, is the first thing I do is I serialize the unit to YAML. So it's like the ship. I capture that and I use the built-in YAML serialization to save that to that before field. After the battle is all over, I run this capture after to collect that. And then once I have that before and after set from before and after the battle, then what I can do is on the combats controller, when somebody wants to go see what's happening, first thing I do is the important lines here are 7, 8, and 9. And so on line 7, I am rehydrating a new Ruby object based on a YAML unsafe load from that before. I was very frightened when this changed a couple of versions ago that I was going to lose this. And then I generate another Ruby object from the aftermath. And then I immediately reassign the aftermath on top of the before. And then I return this object. And this is what I send out to the view. And so now the view has access to, as you can see in lines 9 and 11 here, the view has access to Ruby, like Rails' built-in dirty tracking with the changes array. And so now I can use that and compare and say, oh, at the beginning of the battle, it looked like this, and the end of the battle, it looked like this, all in one object that I just sent to the view all by itself. Let's see. So the support for SVGs, I'm running low on time here. Great. What is, I'll skip these. The last thing that I think is my favorite thing, which I won't skip, is this is in, so all the units have a little trident next to them here. And so maybe I have this galaxy. And so this is, when I click on this, now I get this SVG element that attaches to my cursor, and it highlights all the places that I could go, like all the things I might be able to click on. So I could choose this, and I can click on that. And now it's issued a dispatch order for the thing. It's made some guesses about what I might be able to do with, or what I might be wanting to do with that, and it goes from there. How this works is that the first thing is I attach a StimulusController to the body element, and then I render a partial with some SVG in it. The most important line, which maybe is hard to read because I've tried to highlight it here, is that I set a stimulus target on just one of the elements inside of the SVG object. And then I'm able to, in my stimulus controller, I'm able to grab that and bind it. And then as the user's moving their cursor around, then I can track that and trace it, and then I can, when they're done clicking, I can make some guesses. All right, so that's all the things I wanted to show. What's nice about this is that it's like a lot of it just works. Like Rails was just really happy with all of this. Even Claude was able to understand some of like these weirder things. And it's a stack I'm really comfortable in, so I can like build out this, like I get to try and like build a game company out of like tools that I know really well. This runs on Heroku. And I like have a really simple active admin dashboard that can kind of show me like state of play of what's going on inside things. I understand stats metrics from like working in startups, and so I'm able to kind of like apply those. I can build this retention chart and like kind of get an understanding of like what the sort of like shape of my like signups look like and user base. And so there's that expression. Everyone has a book inside them, which I found out while I was working on this talk. There's a second half of, which is incredibly snarky. But the board game industry has picked up that phrase without the sort of snark, saying everyone has a game inside them. And so if you are interested in building a video game or something like that, you don't need to like go after some other kind of tools. You can use the tools that you already know, all the ones we're talking about this week. And so you can do that. So to check back in on goals, did I convince anyone that Rails is a game engine? Hey, all right. Woo. Woo. It's quiet. Did anybody see something that they've never seen a Rails application do? All right. Woo. All right. Woo. All right. And a separate, like secret third goal, I would love for some of you to try this out. This is an audience that I would love to get feedback from, like on the ins and outs of it, like in play. Awesome. I will yield the stage. Thank you.